Hey guys, I am here filming the start of a brand new series that I am calling Spotlight On, where I get to talk about all the things that are not books but are related to books. So something like book series, or film adaptations, or anything really related to books. And this very first one, I want to talk to you about the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. The Lizzie Bennet Diaries is a web series here on YouTube, and it is a modernization and retelling of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Um, it is a very faithful, actually, adaptation. So for those of you that actually like Pride and Prejudice, it is very faithful. However, if you're kind of like me, where apparently I had read Pride and Prejudice in high school, but I don't actually remember it, or you didn't like the setting or the language, it is very modern, so it may appeal to you. It'll still appeal to you as well. It is told through it is the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. So Lizzie Bennet, Elizabeth Bennet, is doing a school project where she is vlogging twice a week. And so this is how we find out about all the different events that generally are going on in the Pride and Prejudice story. You can actually find so you can find the Lizzie Bennet Diary series at the channel The Lizzie Bennet Diaries. It has everything. There are 100 vlogs, 10 Q&As sprinkled throughout, and 2 bonus videos at the end, for a total of 112 videos, which I know is a lot. Now, the really interesting thing about this series is that when it came out, they actually were doing it as a kind of cross-platform experiment. So they had Lizzie Bennet's diaries, but they also had vlogs from Lydia Bennet and from Maria Lou, which is Charlotte's younger sister, as well as Georgiana Darcy, Gigi, did what was supposed to be product demonstrations for her brother's company, but very much turned into dramatic vlogging, right? And so but they also were on Twitter and Tumblr and Facebook, I think. And it made this really cool thing where, so in some of the vlogs, they'll be like, oh, did you see his tweet? And then they pull it up and they read the tweet. But if you were to go to that Twitter account, you could actually find that tweet, which I think is super cool. And so for anybody who's interested in watching all the videos, not just Lizzie Bennet's diaries, but like all the other vlogs as well, you can actually go to Pemberley Digital. They have a playlist with absolutely everything. Everything will be linked down below, you guys, so don't stress too much. But this is the part of the video where I get to have a big fat content warning. There is domestic abuse in this, specifically emotional abuse, emotional manipulation, and it is on camera. And so if that's something that you need to be wary of, please be aware that it's on the side vlogs. So if you're still interested in it and can handle at least mentions of a bad situation without actually seeing it on screen, you can just watch Lizzie Bennet's diaries and it'll mention it, but you won't see anything. However, if you are watching all of the stuff, it is very much on screen. It is very realistically written and very well acted, and it makes, like, as somebody who I have not been in that kind of a relationship, it still made me acutely uncomfortable watching it. Like, because that's how well acted it was. So just be aware of that. And I think that covers most of the general information. So when we're talking about these kinds of adaptations of books, especially for a visual medium, I think the two main things that people are concerned about is the retelling. How did they handle the retelling? And how was the acting? And so those are the two main things that I am going to cover. And we'll start with the modernization and adaptation of this. Obviously, it is made much more modern just by simple fact of it's vlogs. It is told through vlogs. And I think that that's a really cool medium, a really cool way to look at it. However, because it is Lizzie's vlogs, we are very limited in that that's really the only perspective that we get. Now, I really appreciate how the creators kind of took that limitation and said, how can we, work around it and mitigate it? And I think that they did a really good job. They almost all the characters that are mentioned eventually end up on screen, with the exception of, I think, like 3 characters. 1 cameos, but I don't really count it. But like, so we hear Lizzie talking about her sisters, Jane and Lydia, but we also see Jane and Lydia on camera frequently, and they will give their opinions about what all these events that have taken place. Same thing with her best friend Charlotte. We see Charlotte a lot on camera. And that really helps kind of mitigate the fact that we're only seeing the events through one perspective. Also, what I thought was interesting was their choice, the creator's choice to have Lizzie do costume theater. So there's a lot of events that take place off screen. I should mention that Lizzie, when she's doing her vlogs, she generally sits in front of the camera like I'm doing right now and talks to it instead of like taking her camera to events kind of thing. And so obviously we're not going to see some of these parties and some of these other things. And so what she actually does is she reenacts them, and she dresses up in costume for each of the characters. She picks out 2 or 3 pieces of clothing items, and that becomes her, Darcy costume or her mom costume or whatever. And then she reenacts what happened, usually dragging other people in as well. And I thought that was a very interesting way to tell the events that are clearly happening in her life without her just like sitting there and regurgitating what she thinks happened. And again, that's another way that I think they kind of mitigated the fact that it was only being told through vlogs. And then lastly, of course, as I mentioned before, there are vlogs from other points of view, specifically Lydia, Maria, and Gigi Darcy. And Maria's is, and I think that they did a very, very good job in that each person has something specific to add to the story, and it adds a lot of depth. So like with Lydia, we get a lot of the background story that leads to her problems at the end of the story. With Maria's vlogs, we understand how Charlotte and Lizzie end up reconciling. With Georgiana, we end up seeing how they came to a solution at the end of the story. And I think it ends up adding just a ton of depth to the story, and I think it's very, very well done. And obviously we're also seeing things from another perspective. They occasionally will challenge what Lizzie has been saying on her vlogs, and I think that that's a really cool way to mitigate it. Now, the other thing that I thought that they did really, really well for the modernization portion of it, I have seen a lot of modernizations, and some of them are really, really fun, but they don't make a ton of sense, or they're not really faithful to the themes or the ideas of the original. It's like somebody was just like, oh, hey, I wonder what would happen if it was like the 3 Musketeers, but they all have cell phones, and then they ran with the idea. And it's not that that's not fun, but it doesn't always make a ton of sense. And I feel like this modernization was done with a lot of love, and a love for the original source material, in that they took a step back and said, what are the themes? And what are these big events that happen? And how did it really affect the Bennet sisters? And so one thing that I really like, for example, is that they took a step back and said, okay, there's all these marriage proposals that are flying around in the original Pride and Prejudice, but what did that really mean for them? And what it meant in their time was financial security. They had a future where they were going to be financially secure. That's what a marriage proposal meant to them. So when they did this modernization, there's actually no marriage proposals, because it's not, that isn't what it means for a lot of people anymore. And so the creators asked themselves, okay, what is the modern equivalent of a marriage proposal? And they came up with job offers, because a job offer is financial security. And especially when these came out, there it was I it was, when people were still really struggling to find jobs, especially new grads. And so having that offer of a job waiting for you really meant a lot. And so I think that they did that with a couple of the other really big events where they actually changed it so that the emotional impact was there. It landed with the modern audience in the same way it would have landed in Jane Austen's time. And I think that that's a really, really, really good way to go. So obviously, um, I do think that they did a very, very good job with the adaptation. So the other main part that most people care about with a visual medium is how was the acting? And I was actually very impressed with the acting. I did go into it with maybe lower expectations because it is a YouTube series and I didn't really know what to expect. And so I was kind of like, well, the acting is maybe going to be a problem. But honestly, like every person that was on camera was at the very least solid. Every person was either, somewhere in between solid to absolutely outstanding. And that's really important, especially because there are fewer characters and there's some really important emotional bits that wouldn't have landed with any kind of subpar acting. And so I think they did a very good job casting it. The sisters look alike. Gigi and William Darcy actually look alike. They look like their family. Their acting is really well done. It was just really well cast. And I will say that there are two shout outs that I want to give for absolutely outstanding acting. One is to Mary-Kate Wiles, who played Lydia Bennet. Lydia Bennet was actually, when we first meet her, she seems like a very one-note kind of character, but as it goes on, and especially if you're watching Lydia's vlogs, it becomes very, very apparent that she actually probably, like Mary-Kate Wiles actually probably had the hardest role in the entire series, with maybe the only exception being Lizzie Bennet, right? And it's because she has to play multiple emotions in almost every video, but on the down low. And it's really only apparent once you kind of go back and rewatch it, just how much she had to do this. And she just did an absolutely amazing job. She knocked it out of the park. And which is really, really good because a lot of this would have fallen flat if she had not done such a good job. And then the other person that I want to mention is Ashley Clements, who played Lizzie Bennet. And that's because obviously the whole thing is resting on her. She is in basically every vlog. I think there's like one or two where she's not, but for the most part, she is the main person that we're watching, and it all rests on her. But additionally, she is dressing up as these other people that we actually see on camera. And some of them we see right away, but some of them we don't see until the very end. So we don't see Darcy, even though he's mentioned in the first videos, we don't see him until halfway through. And so when she's acting as Darcy, it was actually really important for her to do a good job so that when Darcy does come on camera, it's not just us, freaking out like, oh, they're finally together, we get to see them together. But also so that, when we're watching how Darcy is acting, we're like, oh, she really nailed that, which lends credibility to some of her, how she's reenacting these scenarios, and it's just, she did a really, really good job. And it just adds this extra layer of kind of awesomeness to it. So yeah, I do think that in general, the acting was really good. I will mention that there were only a few parts where I thought that the acting was not as great, and it didn't generally draw me out. There is one video that I did think one part of it was not acted as well, and it did draw me out. However, it was like after the big emotional beats had kind of landed, and it was just the aftermath, and I thought it wasn't as it just wasn't as good and I got pulled out. But it was pretty easy to jump back in. So even though I did get pulled out, I wasn't like, and I do count it as a negative. I don't think that it's this overwhelmingly bad thing. Like it wasn't bad enough that I'd lower how it lowered my opinion of it. I just wanted to mention it because it is a pretty big thing. Which leads me into, okay, so I've been talking about all these things that are super positive. Is there anything that I think is negative about this? And I do have a couple. And one of them is, honestly, for people who really like retellings to be exact replicas of the books, this is not going to necessarily be for you. If you're going to get really upset that there's no marriage proposals, obviously this isn't going to be for you. It is still very much a romantic story. It's just that there is no marriage proposals. And I know that some people have been really, really upset about it. Most people are okay, but some people have been upset about it. The other is that this is a huge time investment. So like I said, Lizzie Bennet Diaries has 112 videos on their playthrough. I think that the playlist on Pemberley Digital that has everything has something like 165 videos. And yes, they're short. They come out to about 3 or 4 minutes. Some of them are longer, some of them are shorter. But even if you assume about an average of 4 minutes of video, I mean, just to watch the Lizzie Bennet Diaries is about 7.5 hours. And that is a lot. Obviously, it's more if you want to watch all the videos. So it's a time investment. I find that it's easier to think of it more like a TV series than, a movie or a regular web kind of series. And then I feel better about the time investment. On the other hand, because the videos are so short, it is actually pretty easy to like, oh, I've got, 5 minutes here. I'll just watch a video. Of course, then, like, I don't know if you're like me, it was really hard to stop at one video. I would watch like 3 or 4 at a time. So it is a time investment. And then the last con that I had, it's less of a con and more of I wish that I kind of more of a wish, but that's just that when this came out, like I said, it was cross-platform, and so you got to have these tweets that like came out at the correct time for, in regards to the timing of all the videos and all this kind of stuff. And I think that's so cool, and it's such an immersive experience, and I really wish that I could have experienced it, and unfortunately that's obviously just not possible. So if they were to ever do it again and kind of do that immersive thing again, I would 100% be on board. But until that point, it's just kind of, I wish I could. So, but those are really the only cons that I had. I think that this is just amazing. I highly recommend it to anybody, whether you like Pride and Prejudice or not. I think that it has a lot going for it and most people will find something that they like. If you've watched it, please comment down below and let me know, because I'm trying to find people that have watched it and I really want to talk to them about it. If you do go and watch it, please let me know so that we can, again, we can talk about it. But yeah, I really love this series. I want to talk to you guys about it if you've seen it or not, and that's what I got. So there you go. Go enjoy Lizzie Bennet Diaries, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.